Okay, welcome to our tutorial for today. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name's Andrew. I'm your automotive trainer at the Gold Coast Trades College, or one of the automotive trainers. Today we're going to be talking about communicating effectively in an auto workplace. This is one of the core subjects in this qualification, and it's all about communication and appropriate workplace communication. I'm just going to share a screen now to start this presentation this morning, today. As I mentioned, this is a unit on communicating effectively, AURAFA003. It describes the performance outcomes required to communicate in an auto workplace. It involves communicating effectively by conveying and receiving information using verbal and non-verbal techniques and correct automotive technical terminology. It applies to all those working in the auto service and repair industry. Key outcomes are preparing to communicate, participate in routine verbal communication, carry out routine written and non-verbal communication, operate workplace communication system, and also contribute to communication within the workplace. So our next tile or page is a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to run through as part of this tutorial. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about our amenities here at the college, which we normally cover when you are physically here at the college. I've just run through briefly our course objective there as well. I've just mentioned that. A little bit more on course objective. So we're going to start today with some common automotive technical terms. Now, communication in a workplace, whatever industry you're working in, usually has its own technical terms or own terms that are used specifically for that trade. Automotive's no different. We have all sorts of shortened abbreviations for things like R&R, for argument's sake, which means remove and replace. ABS, which is anti-lock braking system. Four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, that's FWD, AWD, and 4WD. We talk about overhaul, we talk about adjusting, repairing, checking, inspecting, servicing. They all mean certain things, and it's useful to know what exactly those things mean in your day-to-day communications. Things, just continuing from that, things like AC, alternating current, DC, direct current, EFI, electronic fuel injection, LWB and SWB, so that's long wheelbase and short wheelbase. CI stands for compression ignition. Brake fade, you might hear that in a workshop when brakes do not work efficiently because of excessive heat. PSI, that's a unit of pressure, an imperial measurement, that is, of pressure. kPa is a metric measurement of pressure, that's kilopascals. OEM is something you hear all the time, that's original equipment manufacturer. Just continuing on with some common technical terms, HP, horsepower, kilowatts, it's 1,000 watts, as in kilo, that's a measure of power. LED, light emitting diode. VIN number, VIN, that stands for vehicle identification number. SUV, you can read these for yourselves. ECM, electronic control module. BCM, body control module. Top dead center, if you're working on engines, you'll know that that's when the piston is at its very top of its travel, known as top dead center. You've got oversteer, understeer. So oversteer is the tendency of a vehicle to turn more sharply than intended, and understeer is the tendency of a vehicle to turn less sharply than intended. Diagnose, I think we all know what diagnose means, determine the fault. Full-time four-wheel drive, so that is all four wheels are transmitting drive all the time. So there are just some of our common automotive technical terms that we use in an automotive workshop. Further to that, Communication is a two-way street. Communication requires speaking, and it also requires listening. There's a term called active listening, and that is a technique that's used regularly by those who are good communicators. It requires that the listener fully concentrate, understand, respond, and then remember what is being said. Active listening improves the understanding between parties and helps better communication. Active listening skills may establish flow in communication and better rapport between parties. There's some really important active listening techniques. There are 6 skills here that I've detailed. The first one will be paying attention. So pay attention to things like body language. Pay attention to other people's facial expressions as well. So when you're listening, pay attention to the other person. So look at them in the eye, make eye contact with those people. It will significantly improve your communication when you pay attention. Withholding judgment, really important aspect. Withholding judgment means you might be more patient and more understanding of somebody else, and not judging them for anything that they might say. That way, you're likely to improve the amount of information that is being shared with you, and your communication may well be significantly improved just by withholding judgment. Another one, number 3 here, is reflecting. So reflect on what's been said. So that means think about it yourself before you respond. So you reflect on what's been said, and then you might respond with something a little more thoughtful. So reflecting is another part of active listening. Number 4, down to clarifying. How would you clarify what somebody said? Well, if you're not exactly sure what somebody's saying or the concept that they might be sharing with you, you can ask clarifying questions. So you can ask a quick question. Could you explain that a little bit better? What do you actually mean by that? Could you clarify that for me? I don't quite understand what you're saying. That's going to help that person think a little bit deeply and choose the correct words. So active listening requires clarifying as well. Also summarizing. So in order for that person who's communicating with you to know that you have heard them speak and heard what they have to say, you can summarize and repeat back to them what it is that they've said to you. That way that person is going to be confident knowing that you have actually heard what they've said and you understand what they've said. So summarize back to that person what they've said to you, and then sharing yourself as well with that person. So that's some active listening techniques, which are a skill. They require a little bit of work and a bit of practice to perfect all of those skills. So just to cover those again: paying attention, withholding judgment, reflecting, clarifying, summarizing, and sharing. Just onto our next tile. The answers you get depend on the questions you ask. So gaining an understanding of specific types of questions that you ask someone not only helps you achieve better answers and build stronger relationships, but it'll also help you avoid misleading people, or worse, prevent you from suffering a dreaded communication breakdown. So let's start with everyday types of questions people ask and the answers they're likely to elicit. So what sort of questions can we ask? Now, just a word of advice here for those watching. These questions may well be, or this information may well be in your assessment as we go forward. So feel free to take some notes or make a note of these particular examples I've got here on the page. They may well be in your assessment. So closed questions generally invite a one-word answer, such as yes or no. So is it hot today? Yes or no. That would be a typical closed question. For example, do you drive? Or did you take my pen? That could be easily answered with a yes or no. They could also include answers to factual or multiple choice questions, such as what's your name, or would you like tea or coffee? They can easily be answered either yes or no. So that would be a typical closed question. They're popular as an icebreaker in group situations because they're easy to answer. Of course, most questions can be open for further discussion, including closed questions, but more on that later. So what are they useful for? Warming up group discussions or giving a quick answer. That would be a closed question. So open-ended questions. Well, open-ended questions require a little more thought and generally encourage wider discussion and elaboration. They can't be answered with a simple yes or no. For example, what do you think of your boss? Why did you choose that car? It's typically not a question you can answer yes or no to. It's more of an open question which elicits a much more detailed answer. And what are they useful for? They're useful for critical or creative discussion, finding out more information about a person or a subject. Open questions are used very commonly by salespeople, for argument's sake. Probing questions. These questions are useful for gaining clarification and encouraging others to tell you more about a particular subject. Probing questions are usually a series of questions that dig deeper and provide a fuller picture. For example, when do you need this finished project? And is it okay if I email it to you? That would be a probing question. So asking more information, tell me more. They're probing questions. Very useful for seeing the bigger picture and encouraging a reluctant speaker to tell you more information, and also avoiding misunderstandings. If you're not clear on something, ask a probing question. You'll get a little bit more example. You'll get a fuller picture. Probing questions. Leading questions. Again, we're talking a lot about questions because communication's a lot about listening and asking the appropriate questions as well. These questions are designed to lead the respondent towards a certain desired positive or negative route. In the workplace, you might encounter leading questions such as, do you have any issues with this project or job? Or did you enjoy working on that project? The former prompts the respondents toward a negative or positive response. The latter towards a positive response. And how did you get on with that project? Will get you a more balanced answer. So in leading questions, you can lead somebody towards the answer that you want. Questions can also be quite manipulative in some cases. You'll hear politicians and some salespeople, I should say, use leading questions to sometimes manipulate an answer. So it's worthwhile understanding and reading a little bit about these sorts of questions in your day-to-day communication. It will help you. More on leading questions. Leading questions could also also involve an appeal at the end that's designed to coerce the respondent into agreeing with the speaker. For example, this project is going well, isn't it? It encourages the respondents to say yes. This works particularly well because psychologically, we prefer saying yes over no. So when we're put on the spot, we'll usually opt for yes. And it's useful for building positive discussions, closing a sale, steering a conversation towards an outcome that serves your interest. A word of warning. It is important that you use leading questions carefully. They can be an unfair way of getting the answer that you want. So as I sort of mentioned a bit earlier, they can be a little bit manipulative. Continuing on with loaded questions are seemingly straightforward closed questions. With a twist, they contain an assumption about the respondent. They're famously used by lawyers and journalists to trick the interviewee into admitting a fundamental truth they otherwise would be unwilling to disclose. For example, have you stopped stealing pens? Assumes the respondent stole a pen more than once. Whether she answers yes or no, she will admit to having stolen pens at some point. So be careful about loaded questions. Of course, the preferred response would be, I've never stolen a pen in my life. But it's not always easy to spot that trap. The questions are quite rightly seen as manipulative. They're useful for discovering facts about someone who would otherwise be reluctant to offer up that information. So that would be a loaded question. Politicians and journalists quite often will use those sorts of questions. Funnel questions. As with a funnel, these questions begin broadly before narrowing to a specific point, or vice versa. When meeting someone new, we usually begin with specific closed questions, such as, what's your name and what do you do? Before broadening out into more open-ended questions. So a funnel question is leading them to other things as well. So what do you do? What's your name? Then you can use that information to funnel into more detailed conversation with that person. Such as, why did you choose to be a firefighter? As you become more comfortable talking to each other. The reverse would be beginning with a broad question before honing in on something specific. It's often used when questioning witnesses to gain the maximum amount of information about a person or a situation. For example, what do you do for a living? Do you work nights? Do you see a break-in? Was there more than one person? And so on and so on. So they often use those sorts of funnel questions in court, and lawyers often use those questions when questioning witnesses. They can also be used, funnel questions can also be used to diffuse tension. Asking someone to go into detail about their issue distracts them from their anger and gives you the information you need to offer them a solution, which in turn calms them down and makes them think something positive is being done to help them. So they're useful for building relationships, discovering very specific information, and diffusing arguments. As you can see, there's lots of different types of questions that you can ask in your communication. Recall and process questions. These questions require the recipient to remember a fact. For example, what's 7 times 7? And where did you put the keys? What's your login password? Process questions, on the other hand, require a respondent to add their own opinion to the answer. These types of questions can be used to test the respondent's depths of knowledge about a particular topic. So you might see your trainer and assessor asking you process questions and recall questions before you're doing your exam. For example, what are the advantages of asking a closed question? Or why are you the right person to lead this project? So they're useful for encouraging critical thought and in-depth evaluation of subjects, tests, interviews, and discussions. So encouraging critical thought, encouraging you to think about what it is that you're about to say. So recall and process questions. Rhetorical questions. These are different beast altogether because they don't really require an answer. They're simply statements phrased as questions to make the conversation more engaging for the listener, who is then drawn into agreeing with you. For example, isn't it nice working with such a friendly team? Is more engaging than this team is friendly, which doesn't require any mental participation from the respondent. Rhetorical questions are often used by coaches or public speakers for effect to get the audience thinking and agreeing. In this way, they're a not too distant cousin of the leading question. So they're useful for persuading people and building engagement. So you can look at this question here. Isn't it nice working with such a friendly team? It's hard to answer no to that one, isn't it? So useful for persuading people and building engagement. All right, a word on tone. So there's different ways to say something. Tone, context, intonation, and body language all help us make sense of what is being asked of us and what is being spoken to us. But what happens when you throw technology into the mix and place a digital screen or a digital distance between the two communicators? What happens then? We can't really put tone, context, intonation, and body language into a text or an email. So emojis and GIFs have made their way into the workplace and they're here to stay. Moreover, there's no denying that they enhance interpersonal communication and go some way towards fulfilling our need for something a little bit more human. So we can say words with different tone. We can say, pick up that pen, or we can say, pick up the pen, or we can say, pick up that pen. We can say it in a number of different ways. That's tone, context, and intonation. It's not so much context, but it's certainly tone and intonation, with a bit of body language thrown in, such as a frown or a smile. It all makes a difference. There's a suggestion out there that non-verbal communication is much more frequent and common than we realise, and it ends up being about 60 to 70% of our communication is non-verbal. Just a little bit more about tone. When used well, emojis and GIFs can make workplace communication a little more fun for everyone. When asking questions over an email or via a team chat, such as Type Talk or some other type of chatting app, why not enhance your message with a GIF or two? Obviously, use a little discretion. You may want to hold back when talking to the new client, but general chit-chat, team collaboration at work, it's the next best thing to talking face-to-face. With a certain level of carefulness towards tone and knowledge of how to ask questions the right way, you can get a lot more out of your work relationship. So yeah, just be careful of the tone that you use when you're talking to people. Have a think about what you're actually saying and the verbal, non-verbal way you're describing what you're saying. So one-on-one verbal communication. So most of our communications are typically one-on-one. You're just talking to one other person, but often you're talking to a team or a group of people as well. Here are some one-on-one verbal communication tips. Each of these is just as important in our personal lives as in our professional lives. By improving your verbal communication skills, you'll quickly connect, build rapport, earn respect, and gain influence and become more likable and accepted. So, number one, be friendly. People communicate with friendly tone and warm smile, almost always have the edge. The reason is simple. We're subconsciously drawn to people who are friendly because they make us feel good and bring more enjoyment to our lives. So be friendly, it'll improve your communication. Think before you speak. One of my favourite English proverbs is better to remain silent than be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. I find that many people say whatever goes through their minds without putting any thought into what they are saying. As a result, they say things that end up reflecting poorly on themselves. So think before you speak. Another one, be clear. Most of us don't have the time, nor do we want to spend our emotional energy to figure out what someone else is trying to say. People who are indirect in their verbal communication also tend to hint at things without saying what's really on their mind and are seldom respected. When there's something you want to say, ask yourself, what is the clearest way I can communicate this point? Continuing on with one-on-one verbal communication, don't talk too much. Last week I met with a personal chef. At first I was pretty impressed with him and considered hiring him for an upcoming event. However, the more he talked, the less impressed I became. Very few people like to be around someone who talks too much and dominates a conversation. So don't talk too much. Be your authentic self. Today, more than any time, people are turned off by those people who feel the need to put on a show to make their point. Instead, people are attracted to someone who speaks from the heart and is genuine, transparent, and real. So be your authentic self. That's much better for communication. Practice humility. Humility is having a modest view of one's own importance. It is one of the most attractive personality traits one can possess, and is one of the most significant predictors of someone who is respected. People who speak with humility and genuine respect for others are almost always held in high regard. Also, speak with confidence. You don't have to sacrifice self-confidence to practice humility. So they can go hand in hand, confidence and humility. Confidence is self-assurance arising from an appreciation of one's true abilities, whereas humility is having a modest opinion of one's own importance. So speaking with confidence includes the words you choose, tone of your voice, eye contact, and also body language. So speak with confidence. One-on-one verbal communication, continuing to focus on your body language. When you're engaged in face-to-face verbal communication, your body language can play as a significant role in the message you communicate as the words you speak. Your body language communicates respect and interest. It puts a real meaning to your words. Be concise. Very few things are more irritating than when someone can't get to the point of what he or she is trying to say. So plan ahead. Consistently ask yourself, how can I say what needs to be said using the fewest number of words while still being courteous and respectful? So be concise, don't waffle on too much. Learn the art of listening would be one of the final things here. Being an attentive listener is more important in verbal communication than any of the words that come out of your mouth. You must show sincere interest in what's being said and ask good questions. Listen for the message within the message and avoid interrupting. I might just play a little video. We'll share a different screen here now. I'm just going to open up this active listening video here and we'll watch that. Sorry, I'll just share the right screen. There we go. We're going to have a little video now on active listening, how to be a great listener.
Many of us don't listen to other people. Instead, we just think and wait for our turn to express our own opinion. Take a step back and look at your colleagues' conversations. It's likely it'll look more like two monologues where everyone tells about themselves.
Hope you can all see that and hear it properly.
The cure for it is active listening. It's a very powerful skill. It brings people closer, builds trust, and helps people to open up. Here are 5 steps on how to do it. 1. Stay focused. Keep natural eye contact, don't judge, and be patient. 2. Really listen. Don't think about your similar experiences and what you should tell next. 3. Allow for periods of silence. Wait till the other person speaks again. 4. From time to time, repeat the other person's words or paraphrase it back to them. It will reassure that you really listen and encourage them to open up. 5. Understand the emotions behind the words. When you paraphrase, also try to express the other feelings back to them. Active listening is rather difficult and can be more tiring than talking itself. Be prepared for long conversations. On the other hand, you will gain trust and people will simply like to spend time with you. You will also understand them much better. At the beginning, try it with your spouse or a good friend. You'll see how great they feel after talking to you. If you want to learn more about optimal lifestyle, subscribe to our channel below.
That's just a little quick video on some active listening skills. Thought I'd show that just to get a little bit more of an overview of what active listening is all about. So I'm just going to share this screen again. This is our back to our PowerPoint presentation. We've been talking about communication, verbal communication, one-on-one communication. A little bit more now as we move through the presentation, non-verbal communication. A lot of communication is non-verbal. Non-verbal communication in a workshop quite often takes the form of a signage. There's a whole bunch of signs out there that communicate to you and those that are reading that sign in a non-verbal way. Attention and danger and things like information signs, like those green signs over here, emergency, exits, they're all non-verbal communication and they all have their place in an automotive workplace. On to the next one, other forms of non-verbal communication. Now, this will be one of the questions in your assessment as well. We've got body language. Now, I think we've all seen different facial expressions. We've got a little blue diagram there with somebody doing all sorts of different non-verbal body language type communications. Also, job cards and written instructions in a workplace. They're also non-verbal communication. Someone can give you a job card, you can read that job card, and know exactly what it is that you have to do without any actual verbal communication at all. So things like job cards, tags that might be on a piece of equipment, signage that might be in the workshop. Reading a workshop manual can be a way of the manufacturer communicating with you as well. So there's a whole bunch of non-verbal communications that will make a difference, including your own text messaging and your own emailing through your workplace. So there's some other forms of non-verbal communication. This particular one I've looked here is just facial expressions. This one person with a whole bunch, what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 different facial expressions there, each portraying something completely different. Now, of course, the human face is capable of millions of different types of facial expressions. Just a slight raise of an eyebrow or the blink of an eye can mean something completely different in all sorts of different contexts as well. So non-verbal communication is quite significant. I think it's worthwhile also discussing communicating with people with special needs. When communicating with somebody with a disability, rather than through a companion, we should speak to those persons directly. Don't be embarrassed if you happen to use an accepted common expressions such as see you later or got to be running along. That may seem inappropriate and it may relate to the person's disability. So don't be too embarrassed at that. It's just a subtle mistake. To get the attention of a person with a hearing disability, tap the person gently on the shoulder or wave your hand. Look directly at that person, speak clearly, slowly and expressively. Place yourself facing the light source and keep your hands and food away from your mouth when speaking. Shouting won't help and written notes will. When talking in conversation, when talking with somebody perhaps in a wheelchair for more than a few minutes, place yourself at that person's eye level to spare both of you a stiff neck. When greeting a person with severe vision loss, always identify yourself with others who may be with you. Say, for example, on my right is Jackie. When conversing in a group, give vocal cues, such as identifying the person to whom you are speaking. Speak in a normal tone of voice, indicate when you move from one place to another, when the conversation is ending. Give your whole and unhurried attention when talking to a person who has difficulty speaking. Keep your manner encouraging rather than correcting. Be patient. Try not to speak for the person. When necessary, ask short questions that require short answers or a nod or a shake of the head, and never pretend to understand if you're having difficulty doing so. Continuing on with that, some common courtesies. Offer assistance to a person with a disability if you feel like it, but wait until your offer is accepted before you help. When giving directions to a person in a wheelchair, consider distance, weather conditions, and physical obstacles such as stairs, curbs, and steep hills. Be considerate of the extra time it might take for a person with a disability to get things done or said. Let the person set the pace in walking and talking. It's okay to ask people about their disabilities, but it's also okay for them not to want to talk about it. If you have friends with disabilities, invite them to visit you and think of ways to include them in the things that you do. Remember to consider their needs ahead of time and let them know if a barrier exists at an event. You're inviting them to. Treat a person with a disability like the way you'd like to be treated, and you'll have a friend for life. Now that's not a complete list of things to do when communicating or with those with disabilities, but it's a good start. On to team communication. We've talked about one-on-one communication. We've talked about communication with those with disabilities, basic introduction. Now we're also going to talk about team communication. So responsibilities of team members to ensure effective communication. So stay open-minded, listen carefully. We've already talked about active listening and some techniques and methods to ensure you are listening. Also in a team, always provide a little bit of feedback as well. Make sure all team members get a second or get a chance to communicate, and always discuss the pros and cons for making any decision. And take ownership of what you say. Use words and examples that your team will understand. So when collaborating in a workshop, in a workplace, collaboration entails working with someone else in order to create or produce something. In automotive workshop context, you might be working on the same car with somebody. It might be a big job. It might get it done a little bit quicker. So you're actually getting things done a little bit quicker. So you might need to collaborate with that person. You might need a willingness to find solutions to problems, recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of both parties, taking responsibility for any mistakes you might make, giving credit to others for their contribution, and actively listening to the other team members' concerns. So workplace collaboration, a few tips there. Now, another aspect to communication in our community and our lives today is cultural effects on communication. We see in our day-to-day lives all sorts of different people from all sorts of different cultural backgrounds. Those folk may well have completely different language, different set of values. They may have different behaviours, certainly may have different beliefs and different social norms as well, have different perceptions and different attitudes. All of these aspects go towards making a difference to the way that you might communicate with those with a different cultural background to yours. So my suggestion is to be considerate of people with different cultural backgrounds than yours. Take into consideration all of these things when you're speaking to that person. So here are some strategies to use for effective cross-cultural communication. So ask some questions, distinguish perspectives, build self-awareness, recognize that there may be some complexities, avoid stereotyping. That's a good one. Don't always think that somebody from a certain cultural background is a certain type of person. So do not stereotype. Respect your differences. It takes a lot of different people to make the world go round. And there are many, many different people on the planet. Listen actively, be honest, be flexible, think twice, and ask questions. Certainly keep an open mind as well. So a little bit more about communicating in a workplace. There's the iceberg principle, which is another consideration when you're talking to somebody. The words, the tonality, the body language, and the gestures are the things that you can see. But as described or as sort of illustrated in this picture, what's underneath what you can see? So there's always a deeper structure underneath somebody's words and tonality, body language, and gestures. Some of those structure that might be underneath are people's beliefs, people's values, people's biases, people's prejudices, experiences, fears, dreams, and feelings. They're all of those, or a list of those things that you typically can't see. And they do make a difference to the way people communicate with you. So it's worthwhile considering those things. A little bit more about work orders and job cards. We've touched on that before. We touched on it where we're talking about non-verbal communication. Work orders and job cards are commonly used in an auto workshop. They're very useful for collecting all the information required for the job. Once the job's completed, they can be easily stored and provide a record of any maintenance performed on a vehicle. When properly filled in, they're an excellent form of non-verbal communication between service advisors and technicians to add to the efficiency and profitability of a workshop. As I mentioned earlier, I could give you a work order or a job card, and you know exactly what to do to that vehicle. So once properly filled in, you can use them to your benefit. There's an example of a job card. Your auto repair centre, we're calling this one. It might have the description of the work being done and obviously the name and the address of the owner of the car and the numbers of kilometres that might be on the car, the age and the make and the model. All those details will be filled out in that job card and work order. So when it is handed to you, you'll have all the information there. Much more time consuming than speaking that information to someone. Just going over again some of the information to be included on that job card. This will be one of the questions in your assessment. What would you write on a job card? Well, the VIN number, for argument's sake, and you might remember what a VIN number is from our first page on our PowerPoint presentation. We talked about a VIN number, registration number, the details of the work being done, the number of kilometres the vehicle has done, and is the vehicle under warranty? Not to mention the customer's detail, including their contact numbers and their addresses. Warranty cards. This is another form of non-verbal communication. It might be a label like that. It's going to have the date of work on there. You might put the VIN number of the car, the make and model, the build date, the details of the faulty component. Something else you'd probably put on that part is how many kilometres the car's done once that component has been removed. That's a typical warranty card. Another form of non-verbal communication in a workplace. A little bit more on repair manuals, parts manuals, maintenance records, and equipment manuals. Again, all forms of non-verbal communication. You can read a book and read a manual and understand how to disassemble or reassemble a component without talking to anybody. So that non-verbal communication is pretty valuable. These sorts of work manuals and equipment manuals regularly used in the automotive workplace. Illustrations are quite detailed and can save a lot of time in trying to explain how something works or being able to look inside something before you've even pulled it apart. So excellent resource, excellent way of communicating as well. And you can see automotive repair manuals, parts manuals, maintenance records, and equipment manuals. There's many, many different types of components to an automotive car. And of course, those manuals can be quite detailed. As I've just touched on, they're a crucial part of automotive servicing. Manufacturers are now providing workshop manuals in electronic form, such as CDs and automatic downloads. Saves time, space, and money. And the manuals can be stored, updated easily, and the information is accessible from anywhere, usually on websites these days. But there's a way you can use a search function for finding the correct procedures and specifications is now easier and quicker. Cars are becoming more complex, so those manuals are becoming thicker and bigger and larger. So automatic downloads, CDs, and memory sticks and websites are commonly used these days in the automotive to be able to find that information. So we're just going on to communication devices. So in a automotive workshop, and in fact at most workshops, whether it's automotive or anything these days, there's going to be some type of communication device. So I've got a picture here in blue of all sorts of different devices that might be used in a workshop situation. Of course, we all know what a cell phone or a mobile phone is. We all know what a computer and a laptop is. They're two great communication devices. Bluetooth devices such as Bluetooth speakers, intercoms, commonly used in offices where there's lots of rooms. Television screens. We use TVs here at the college to display presentations and so forth. GPS instruments, pages, radio, fax machines, a little bit outdated now, fax machines, and infrared enabled devices as well. So these are devices that would be commonly used to communicate all sorts of different messages in workshops. So how would we use those sorts of devices? You've all been to a train station, no doubt, and you've heard somebody use a loudspeaker, which is a communication device. And you'll often find in those train platforms, very hard to hear the person speak. For whatever reason, they either don't speak clearly or the system is not conducive to good broadcasting of message. So when you do use any communication device, make sure you speak really clearly. Make sure you're concise. Make sure you're polite and courteous. Make sure you're respectful and considerate. If you're answering the phone, answer phones in 3 rings. Say, is there anything else I can help with? Some more ideas when sending emails and broadcasting written communications. So if you're sending a letter, sending an email, maybe even a text, use spell check and correct punctuation. Use branding and email signatures. So if you, any of students watching or listening get an email from me as your automotive trainer, I'll have an email signature on my email message so you know who I am and you know where I work. That email should be professional, should consider ethical and moral issues, and the audience could be huge. So always think before you send an email or some sort of written communication. How to set out a message. So use a proper salutation. Always open a formal email with a salutation. For example, hello, Mr. Smith. Now we'll be in our practical task for this particular unit. We are going to be composing an email, and we'll be going to compose a script for a phone call to a client, asking them to spend or asking them to spend a little bit of extra money on some urgent repairs on their vehicle. So that'll be one of our tasks. So pay attention to this next couple of pages because you'll need to remember this for your assessment. So use a proper salutation. Always open a formal email with a salutation. Hello, Mr. Smith. Explain why you are writing the email. During the servicing of your vehicle, we have found XYZ. Prioritise the most important information. The brake pads are worn and require replacement. The discs require machining. Setting out your message. Get to the point. The extra cost will be $450. Use polite language. Good morning, thank you, and please. Use a proper form of closing. Kind regards, or best regards, or just plain regards is a useful form of closing. So just remember that when writing an email or a message. Just on to the next section. What is a style guide? Now you may or may not have heard of a style guide. If for argument's sake, our college here, the Gold Coast Trades College, were to send you an email or a letter or any other type of communication, we follow a style guide. That style guide is a reference point that sets the standards for writing documents within an organisation. The focus of the style guide is not usually a matter of correct or incorrect grammar, but rather it provides a guidance as to what our letters and our communications are going to look like. So here are 6 elements of a brand style guide. So our brand is a particular brand. It has a story. We have a logo. We have certain colors that we use. We have certain topography, and we have certain imagery. All of that will be consistent across the college. All right, this brings us to the end of our presentation. Again, this is about communicating effectively in an automotive workplace. Feel free to go through this presentation again, have a read of some of these tiles. What I'd like you to do next is to head towards the assessment. So just press next here, and sorry, I've gone back from the start. The assessment resources will be here. It's just a matter of downloading that assessment, and I'm just getting into it now. There's our assessment tool. You'll notice up the top here, there is a download button here. You can download that to your desktop or your laptop, whatever you're watching this tutorial on. This is an editable PDF. So once downloaded, you'll be able to edit these fields. I'll just give you a quick example of that. You'll be able to edit these fields as you go through the assessment. So you can see here, you can type something in here. ABS means, put your answer in there. Once you've answered all of the questions, apart from the practical side of the course, of the unit, I should say. Save that onto your desktop and then upload that assessment just here where it says drop files here. Once you've uploaded it to there, we will receive it our end and we'll be able to assess your work. If you've got any questions about anything I've spoken about today, feel free to contact me at the college or contact anyone from the college. If you're having trouble working the system or even logging in, then feel free to contact me at the college and we'll make sure we get a different login to you. Any questions about the course, send me an email, and good luck with the assessment. So that brings us to an end today for this tutorial, and I will catch you next time around. Thank you.